Hello, and welcome to Hard Hat Heroines, project tales from women in construction, with your hosts, Sarah, and myself, Eve. And we're here today with Danielle Gillespie, who is a senior design manager at Gilbert-Ash and has had a very varied and interesting career that we're excited to jump in and have a conversation about.
So, Danielle, I'm really interested. You started on site, you worked for an architectural practice out in Macau, and then
Yes.
went client side for a bit, and now you're contractor side with Gilbert-Ash. Usually people go the other way, as in they work towards client side. Walk us through at like a high level, a bit about you and your career trajectory before we go into the projects.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sarah. I started consultant side and then out in Macau just probably 1 or 2 years after I graduated. Really great opportunity working for Fridays Architects, first of all, based on site, doing 2 Sheraton hotel towers, the largest Sheraton in the world, 4,500 rooms. I was resident interior designer on that. It was consultant side on site, learning a lot, which was amazing. But then also traveling to Hong Kong once a week to our head office in One Island East. It was really varied. I was there 2.5 years. Then the project came to an end. An opportunity came up with Galaxy Entertainment, which led me into design management, which is now the career that I'm now in and have been ever since. But again, that was then that change, I suppose, going to client side, so client developer side. I remember going for the interview and not really understanding. I remember saying to my partner, who's now my husband, and I said, I actually don't know what this job is, but I'm going to go and have the conversation and see where it takes me. With the Sheraton, I've been working on hotel rooms. So we were like 1 bay rooms up to like 7 bay suites and, just really luxurious high end finishes. And then whenever I moved to design manager, it was like, right, okay, you've done rooms now. Do you want to do front of house? And I thought, why not? Galaxy Entertainment was the company that I went to work for, who are basically developer and operator. And it was a massive integrated scheme, similar to what the Sheraton was. So it's hotel, casino, retail component, construction value, billions of US dollars. So it's just really massive scale, up to like 15,000 on site every day, which is always fun when you come home and you say that to someone. They're like, no, you mean like 1,000? I'm like, no, 15,000. Really cool project. I suppose I'll just share some images then, starting with the JW Marriott. So really, really interesting dynamic. So JW Marriott normally will build and develop and operate their own hotels. This was like a joint venture with Galaxy. So Galaxy Entertainment are one of the largest developers in Southeast Asia, and they are currently bringing every hotel brand there is to Macau. This was probably one of the first hotels they built. JW Marriott and Ritz-Carlton, who are all owned by the same company. But this was really interesting for me because it was going from all these like really high-end spaces and working with the best in the industry, from the consultant team to the supplier. So you'll see even in these images, the one on the top right corner is the main atrium and check-in space. As you go into the atrium space, there's a glass lift. And then these are like perspex panels that are suspended in front of it. And then it goes up into the ceiling, into the atrium area as well. And this was done by a Japanese artist, Sunny Park. We worked with her and she's just a really cool person. I spent a lot of time with her doing that. You got to get involved. My role on this was senior project manager of design. So you had all the different facets within that. My role was purely interiors and the design, whereas you had like another senior project manager of just lighting or landscape and the retail components. But it was really interesting. We traveled to mainland China to do all the buy-offs as well. You'll see in the pictures in the top left-hand corner, this was all backlit onyx. So we would travel to mainland China, do the buy-offs, review the drawings, sign off everything. And I suppose we were working on client side, and which was really interesting. And you'll see as well, just talking about the finishes, this piece along the back wall is actually from Fremantle. So you're based in England, and we worked total bespoke wall covering, but just made in all individual pieces and then hand placed. I think the thing that I really enjoyed about this, it was so different from working at home where budget is always a consideration, but it's not the main driver. All of it is funded by the casinos. And I don't know what they make now, but when I was there, they were making 15 times what Las Vegas was in revenue. So there's so much money and wealth there to really spend on the hotels. But it was quite interesting as well because JW Marriott, and I suppose that would lead into what we were doing in the Ritz-Carlton as well. It, again, really like lavish finishes, marble. We went to buy the Carrera in Italy, and the blocks were brought over to China. We would review the slabs. Really nice, the best of finishes in everything that they did, even down to the small decorative pieces of ceramics. These were all placed by hand. JW Marriott, this was the first one they had done. It was like a joint venture. The Francis Louis is the vice chairman of Galaxy Entertainment, who would have been, I suppose, our boss, so to speak, although there was lots of layers before you would get to him. But we would do these presentations with him every few months. The design team would have flown in. The architect was based in Hong Kong. And HBA, Hirsch Bedner Associates, were the interior designer from Singapore. We would have met in Macau on Friday and they would have presented their design. There may have been 30, 40 people around the table and they would have presented to our vice chairman. And it was quite funny, you would get his comments on the Friday. Then we would go to Hong Kong and meet with Ritz-Carlton and JW Marriott on the Monday. And they would be like, no, this is not our brand. We do not want this. And then you would take it back to him and he would basically be like, I don't care. I'm paying for it and I want this in my hotel. So there was a lot of managing expectations and I suppose being aware of the hotel brands as well. The experience was amazing. It's just a bit like Disneyland meets Google. Like it's so different to working in Asia and working in Macau. I suppose it's a bit like London, I suppose. Like it's a microclimate. It's so different to anywhere else in Asia. But it was really, really exciting. And you worked with so many like different suppliers and just really suppliers and designers who are the top around the world.
I grew up in the Middle East and the UAE. I totally understand the difference in specifications. And if you think about most projects in terms of a triangle where you've got scope, cost and quality, the cost element to not have that as much must be so freeing and actually really enjoyable.
It really was. Whenever you've said that, Sarah, it reminds me the majority of the light fittings in the hotel were from Las Vite. Las Vite are one of the world relating Czech, really glass fabricators, but they're just artisans. So a lot of the chandeliers we did with them as well, and I suppose going back to the JW Marriott entrance, it's quite difficult to see from this photograph, but around the lift, there were droplets of glass. They were supposed to look like droplets, but they basically cascaded down and they're all suspended on wires. It was really funny because I remember the team coming over and they're just real artisans in their class. Everything's hand blown glass and, there isn't anything mass. Everything's, bespokely fabricated specific for that project. And, they came over with all these different samples and you're reviewing them, and I would have been reviewing them with my boss, who was the senior vice president of design, and he, exacting, real exacting requirements. And sometimes you would look at and say, like, really, what is the actual difference here? But they, so specific, so bespoke, and it was just another world. I loved it.
I agree. In a world where MMC is great, that individual, the real high-end artisan where it's that bespoke, I think there's a lot of beauty in it.
Even down to the selection of the marble, and we would have gone and the blocks would have come and then you would have done the pre-lay, whenever they slabbed it, and then you would have done the dry lay off-site, then you would have completed the dry lay on-site. And even in this image in the middle where it shows the red roses, so this was the main entrance, the Ritz-Carlton on the ground floor, and there was these large mirrored panels, but the positioning of the marble, the way they wanted it matched and book matched throughout, the wastage was massive, but they didn't care. It was all in pursuit of perfection. And I really loved that. Even the details of the carving, when they're water jet cutting, we would have gone to see that as well. And the details of the beautiful mirrors and everything, it was amazing.
It looks spectacular.
It was interesting. We went out there at a time, this was 2009, 2010, and the economy at home was taking a real hard hit. We would come home at Christmas time and it's almost like we didn't want to talk about the life that we were living over there and the design and the construction. We couldn't really identify with what was going on at home, because it is such a microclimate in relation to how it's commercially funded and driven as a place. Macau is one of the most densely populated places on the world. It's only like 26 square kilometers, but what they're doing there, it's amazing. I think that was what I found almost strange about coming home, because you were used to these massive, multi-billion US dollar projects. And then it was like you would come home. And I think that probably leads me on to, whenever I came home and I worked for Gilbert-Ash. So I worked for another company for about 8 or 9 months whenever I moved home, a company, HVTia. And then it was actually a guy who I'd known with and worked with years previously to that, a great guy, Stephen Chia. But then I moved to Gilbert-Ash. It's funny working in projects in London. And I suppose the National Portrait Gallery, everyone in Gilbert-Ash is sick listening about National Portrait Gallery, but it was an amazing project. That's what made me make the move to Gilbert-Ash, because Gilbert-Ash are so selective in the projects that they do. They have a real lovely mix of projects, and they're really into landmark projects like the National Portrait Gallery and Sterling nominated projects. I was really fortunate to work on the National Portrait Gallery. We had a great team at Gilbert-Ash, and the client team, Jamie Fobert, Architects, was the lead architect, and Jamie's a great guy. I'd class him as a friend now, and such a nice team of people. And then Purcell was the heritage architect on, again, Liz Smith and her team, and Nick Shantarasak, who was the project architect. Just a really lovely team and a really lovely job. Typically 85% of our jobs are design and build, but the National Portrait Gallery was traditional because the client team wanted to hold on tight to that design. They wanted to be the sole custodian of that design. But the National Portrait Gallery will always be a really special project for us. We were extremely devastated to lose out to the Elizabeth line at the Sterling Awards, but it was a massive project for us, real cut and carve. The nice thing about it was that whole team ethos and collaboration was key to everything we did on that project. Going for those massive projects to this, smaller, the National Portrait Gallery was ended up about 29 million, by the time it was finished. And I suppose similar to what I did in Macau, there were so many intricate pieces of it. There was a lot of changing the entrance. I suppose from this image, you'll see one of the main focus was they wanted to make the gallery more inviting to everyone rather than having the previous entrance, which is just to the side of the building. It was this entrance coming off Charing Cross, and the whole interesting thing we had to put a bridge in of concrete that Jamie Fobert and the team thought could be done in 2 pieces at the start. It ended up being in 5, but he always jokes if they had said 5 at the start, we would have said it needed to be done in 10 pieces, So it was really fun, and we worked with a lot of great subcontractors and new subcontractors to us actually as well. Restore London, so again, stonemasons, total artisans in their craft, and whenever we were creating those openings, and there was just samples upon samples upon samples with Purcell and Jamie Fobert to just really perfect that. And I think we had 14 different door suppliers on the project coming in through the front doors that Tracy Emin did the art for. Big bronze panels, and the Bassett and Finlay doors, big glass floor to ceiling doors as you come in, and then a beautiful terrazzo floor. And we worked with Ed Lazenby, who owns Lazenby as well. Like Ed himself was heavily invested in the project, and just a lot of artisans. And there was a massive mechanical and electrical component which had to be, very sensitively weaved into that retained fabric, because it's a listed building. We were really fortunate. The client and the board of trustees at the National Portrait Gallery, just lovely people, and everyone just had the same goal, that they just wanted the best outcome for that project. It'll always be a really special project for us.
It's so nice when a whole team pulls in the same direction across the different, like the client, consultant, subcontractor,
Yes.
main contractor. When everyone's got that shared vision, it's a real win. I'm intrigued, going from consultant to contractor side, how did you find that?
It's really funny. I find it quite an easy a transition, and I kind of think it was nice, and sitting on consultant side, then going to client and developer side, you get a different appreciation, I suppose, from contractor side. I suppose contractors years ago probably would have been held in a little bit different regard than what you are now. You're very much part of the team, and everyone's brought along together. I remember us going to the interview for the National Portrait Gallery, and it was September. COVID had hit that March. things were starting to open up again. And I'd actually just came back from maternity leave at the end of August with our second son. I remember talking to my boss, our technical director, who's amazing. He said, Danielle, how are you feeling about traveling? And I said, fine. I said, all our work is in the UK. At that time, we weren't working in Dublin or anything. And I said, totally fine. It's part of the job. And he said, well, I don't see you needing to travel for a few months. Everything's pretty much still locked down. And it was, I think, 3 days back. And it's like, right, we're going for the National Portrait Gallery. And they have asked if everyone can come and interview in person. And it was so surreal in the centre of London that September. Like, it was the apocalypse. There was nobody, not one soul. Everything was closed. I remember we met in a Pret and then we walked around. The interview was in one of the lecture theatres off the National Portrait Gallery. The 5 of us sat on stage with these like bright lights shining on us. And there was about 30 sitting in the audience, and that included, Nicholas Cullina, the director of the gallery, and then it was like the whole design team, the project manager, the QS, everyone was there. I always find that interesting, and I'll share that with the team that I work with in Gilbert-Ash. It gives you a different perspective, because I would normally be sitting in the audience and not on the stage in that scenario. A lot of people ask me, what's your favorite role? And I really enjoy client and developer side, but contractor for me, I couldn't imagine working in any other role. It's so interesting. It's never dull and always challenging. Some days you want to cry, other days you laugh, but I think it's just, construction is a really team. You don't do anything if you don't, I've met some people in construction, and they're very much I, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how are you ever going to deliver a job? Because it has to be everyone, and I'm very conscious everyone has their role to play in every project. At Gilbert-Ash, and this project especially, we had an amazing site team. I remember Jimmy Fobert saying recently to me, he said, my team, always used to hate going to site until they came to Gilbert-Ash's job at the National Portrait Gallery, and they look forward to going to site, because our team, they were so patient, and they just wanted to work together. Everyone was a team, and it was very much like, okay, we have a problem here, let's find a solution together. That was the only way you were ever going to deliver that project so successfully. If someone is looking a 9-to-5 job, I don't think it's that career. Other people working with me would say it's just a mindset, and you need to get yourself into a way of, you come in at 9, you leave at 5, and you don't work at weekends or nights. I am just not wired that way. I always think there's always something that you can be doing, and I think construction, your mind just never stops. We had probably 2 years ago, was our biggest year for bringing placement students in. And I remember one of our contracts managers, Emma, and I had sat down with them for an hour, just an introduction to the company and an oversight of our roles. And Emma said, I sleep with a notepad and pen beside my bed. And I was like, why are you telling them that? I used to do that too, but I'm not going to tell a placement student that, to totally put them off at the start. And he was like, well, it's just all part and parcel of it. And I said, well, I suppose to an extent it is. And it is just that. And I find that it's just very hard to just switch off from it, because I think you're used to working at such a fast pace. Like, I normally find I get sick whenever I take leave, because your body's just like, right, okay, what is going on now?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And around like the adrenaline sort of dropping, and then your body just needs to catch up, especially when it's coming to handover and practical completion. It's like, that come down after that is significant.
Absolutely. And that's probably a good point to lead on to our current job, which we are trying to hand over in earnest to our client this week. So Gilbert-Ash do a lot of work with Whitbread, who owns Premier Inn. And we also completed citizenM London Victoria beside Victoria Station, which brought us to Dublin with citizenM. We have 2 other jobs in Dublin as well. So we are now in the Dublin market. I was joking with my husband at the weekend. My husband is fortunate. He works a 4-day week. He said, by the time you got to Wednesday this week, you'd almost done twice my hours. I said, yeah, that's just construction. Last Wednesday night, there was 3 of us still walking the hotel at 3:30 in the morning, just doing the final checks before building control were coming. The process in Ireland is a bit different in relation to BCAR and the whole approvals process. It's really good from a de-risk point of view, from the client, from the contractor, from the team as a whole. So they do a lot of first article inspections, which I feel you should be doing on every job. It sets the standard from the beginning. This hotel's 245 rooms. If you make a mistake, you're going to make it 245 times. So let's get that right at the start. But this building is quite interesting. It's a modular build, so it's a modular hotel. We couldn't get the modular to work in Dublin in relation to the fire requirements. So we built a modular brand. Traditionally, we were building concrete frame, brick facade, traditionally built with internal rooms to exacting dimensions that are normally dimensions that are worked off-site modular construction. Whereas we were building those with partition walls, your concrete frame, your tolerances. And it was pretty interesting. Disability access consultant was particularly interesting whenever we found out it has 15 disabled rooms or DA rooms in the upper floors. And we found we were short in one of the room by 8 mil, and it was just, that's not acceptable. So we were then looking to how we could get another 8 mil out of the room. Very exacting dimensions. A really interesting job, lovely client, Dutch client, for their first hotel in Ireland, a bit like ourselves. So there was a lot of learning going hand in hand, what their expectations and just in relation to compliance and building regs, which Part B is a bit different to what we would have Part B in the UK. The added complication of this, we'd have retained Stevenson facade. You'll see in the image with the coloured glazing at the front. There's artwork behind that. But it was really interesting. We're hopeful that the end is in sight this week because our client is really keen to get their team moved in to start trying out the rooms, etc.
Have you found the experience, aside from finishes, let's not go into that because we've already touched upon it, but in the sense of doing the hotels in Macau versus the hotel in Dublin, are there any key differences that you found from a market perspective?
I think, with me in Macau, because my role was just interiors, and then whenever I came to interview for the job as design manager at Gilbert-Ash, my boss, and he's still my boss to this day, he's brilliant. He said, well, Danielle, that's great. And, the images and what you've done in Macau is so impressive, and the scale, is really impressive. Our design managers have to come in and, you're doing everything from substructure, drainage, superstructure up. And I was like, right, okay. So that was quite a steep learning curve for me because in Macau, I just had all the lovely finishes and furniture and the FF&E. And now it was like, right, okay, now we're getting into structure, curtain walling, all your services coordination. The scale of it was so much bigger in Macau. You had your own respective teams. Whereas you come back home and it's very much like, okay, design manager, you're responsible for everything. You need to know a bit of everything, and then you to manage that team to get the delivery to the best place that you can get it. And I suppose following the design program and tying that in with the construction program is really key in relation to delivery. citizenM for us was a bit different because they're an established brand. They have a lot of existing supply chain that, are nominated, and you work with them. It was really interesting, and some of it's been quite challenging bringing them along with us too, especially from a compliance point of view.
Yeah, and they would have been learning as well, right? So in that supply
Absolutely.
So, the idea is doing the one, I should imagine, hopefully in Cork, because I'm biased. I'm a big fan of Cork. You now know for next time.
Absolutely, and that's what we said to the guys. It's such a learning curve, but you learn so much. It was like, let's do another one because we've learned so much from this. And, the BCAR process in relation to consultants and all the suppliers and the subcontractors, they all have to provide their own ancillary certifications, basically their sign off on each of their elements of the work. We got that a lot with Dutch suppliers, based in Amsterdam and in Holland in general. And it was like, oh no, well, I'm not signing that. No, you are signing that because we need that as a prerequisite to complete the building control. So, there was a lot of guidance and armpit round each other. It was like, come on, let's do this together. It wouldn't have worked any other way to get to the successful project outcome the way the hotel has turned out. And the client is really delighted. And we had building control there last week, a few issues with the lifts that kind of let us down in relation to achieving the certification, but we had building control there on Thursday, and then you have these emails from the client on Friday morning saying, guys, such a good job, The hotel looks amazing. It's ready for occupation. Final push, let's do it together. And that's been very much the process all the way through. And I suppose for Gilbert-Ash, that is the way we approach projects. It's very much sign the contract, put the contract in the drawer, and let's just deliver this together as a team.
The dream. One of the things I definitely didn't realise is, and this could be a contentious point, given my partner's Irish, but you always assume that Ireland would be like the UK, but building regs really surprised me. I stupidly assumed it would be very similar to the UK. When I found out about it, it's so much more onerous than what we're used to in the UK. And I should imagine even within Europe, where they do a lot of work in the UK, it is so different.
Completely. And they say, you know, looking at a lot of specifications, and we'd be used to BBA certs in the UK. No, BBA certs not achieved. It must be NSAI. Even from a compliance point of view and a statutory, it is so different. You would think there was more than the Irish Sea between the countries for the stark contrast. It's definitely been a learning curve, and especially having citizenM, and they're a great client, but them being Dutch as well, you know, they would say, I work very closely with the other senior design manager on the client side, and he would say, but why do we have to do this? It's so frustrating. This is not European standards. This is Dublin standards. And I would just say, welcome to Dublin. Ireland is very different, because there's been discussions too in relation to getting specifications passed and looking at all. I don't think I've ever looked at slip resistance and color contrast as much on any other job. It's just very much like, okay, does it achieve the wet and dry slip rate? Yeah, right, let's go. But it is interrogated, and we've been doing pendulum tests and load tests. It's very onerous, but in a good way. You know, what you were saying, Sarah, there too, you know, about Europe. Okay, we're not following, they follow British standard in some ways, then it's EN in another. And you're like, okay, well, EN in Europe is completely different to what EN means in Dublin. And there's been so much of that with specifications and, you know, but the great thing about it is I look at this job and the process in relation to BCAR, I would be confident that there's no residual risks on this project for anyone. The consultant team, the design sign off, all the processes the design goes through, and your DAC for disability access compliance with your slip ratings, your colours, fire compliance, cavity barriers, fire stopping. It's really rigorous, and everything is properly documented, photographed and tagged. There's all that evidence, and you know, it's almost like golden thread. There's a clear line from that concept design through design, construction, and then install on site. You know, it's very clear, and the documents and the process integrated in Ireland, you know, it can only be a good thing. And I think a lot of that I see will come through in relation to the BSR and the Building Safety Act in the UK. We're working with SWECO Ireland as the sign certifier, and another great lady, Helen Duffy, and Helen's involved in seeing a lot of, you know, that new regs in Ireland, and she has oversight because of SWECO in Ireland, SWECO in the UK, but there's a lot of similarities there, which I think it can only be good for everyone, because it de-risks for everyone involved in the project, you know, including the client and what we're delivering to them as an end project as well.
And it's how it's meant to work, right? What frustrates me with the Building Safety Act and the golden thread, when you talk to people who don't work in the industry, it's like, well, how did this never happen anyway? That is the norm of just being...
Absolutely.
I feel like it's sort of like waking up to being like, no, in the sense of that design information, install, handing over to maintain and operate. And in this case, it's the end client. So they have that visibility of the build up to that asset, and then as it's maintained and operated through its life cycle.
This project has run on a little bit longer than we it was a really aggressive program, you know, and it has ran on, I suppose, a bit past that, but very much working together with a client, and we've given them like access, like basically all their staff now are in the hotel, and they have been for a number of weeks, training and making cocktails the other day, and all their staff are in there. So whenever we deliver this, hopefully on Wednesday this week, we're hoping to get the cert, and they'll be in the following week. It's just the whole collaboration piece, you know, and everyone's so proud of what everyone's achieved together, which I think construction, like that's the nice thing. It's all done together and as a team. Although there are challenges and some days you could kill each other. You get to the end and the adrenaline, you're like, look at what we've achieved together. Like it's something really amazing, and citizenM are really cool in that like they engage with local artists where they go, all the different cities around the world. So they engage with a poet and have the poetry on the side of the building, and on the inside of the Stevenson facade she's actually from France, but she's been in Dublin probably about 14-15 years, Clara Provost. And it's beautiful, and it's all to do with the birds and the bird markets in Dublin, and really vibrant colours. You see the reflection through the glass there, but really like quirky, and their furniture, it's so different for Dublin. It's a brilliant addition of it. There's so many hotels in Dublin, but there isn't really anything quite like it. It's quirky and a bit different, and they spend a lot of money on their furniture in the ground floor areas. They invest a lot commercially in their rooms. Everything's controlled by an iPad in rooms, from your blinds to your lights to the TV. It's very 21st century tech based,
Have you noticed that a common theme running throughout all of the projects you've shared is like at the end of the day it's the aesthetic really matters. Have you noticed that? And around
Yes.
across from like the start to the end, they're all aesthetic plays a key part in each of the projects you've shared, which I love.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably something that I really enjoy, the finishing part and having something that everyone can be really proud of. And some of the conversations that we know that have gone on, in the project, the colour of the mortar and the colour of the mastic that you're coming in with. My construction colleagues would be like, oh, it's fine, just put it in. It's like, no, it's a considered approach of what we're doing here.
I've definitely had a few construction managers in my time say to me, Eve, literally here looking at 5 different white colours. Like, can we just build it?
So true. We would have that conversation and say, yeah, and that is why you're the contracts manager or the quantity surveyor, and why I am the design manager on the project.
I think that's the thing about fit out. It's like Shell and Core takes you, knock yourself out from a civils and structure perspective, but it really is the fit out that gives it its character. And I think different things that you can do within that space.
Oh, totally. Like the ground floor, like citizenM, their brand is, they're quite heavy in the furniture, but they have really lovely furniture. There's a lot of Vitra and Eames, and they really invest in pieces. There's a lot of furniture on the ground floor. The fit out of this one came from a company in Holland. Their craftsmanship is amazing. The joiners who worked on it in the factory were the joiners that came to install their individual pieces in Dublin on site. And we would be used to like longer installs for the joinery, and they were very adamant, 2 weeks, we'll be in and out, and that was full floor to ceiling shelving and all their details. And they did the bar, and they were probably done in about 10 days. It's amazing, their whole process. It's said to Remco, who owns the business. It's a really nice model that you do with the joiners, their craftsmanship, they do that in the factory, and then they come and they're responsible for their piece of install, making sure it fits, making sure it works. And it's really lovely. 3 weeks, that ground floor space went from shell to basically being substantially complete, and it is amazing, the transformation of it.
So assuming practical completions,
yes, everything crossed.
What's next?
We're opening a Dublin office now. We think we're there, so let's make a proper go of it. We're looking at different opportunities in Dublin. We're also looking at a very prestigious job in London, which I'm really hoping we will hear this week. If we haven't, we're really conscious that we will have. Again, it's a bit like MPG, it's cut and carve, and really just lovely job in the centre of London. So that is hopefully where I will be going next, but obviously big focus for me is still on developing our Dublin market.
Nice. Well, you've got all the building control knowledge now.
I know, I'm making myself be stuck here to a certain degree, I know.
Once there's like one person who knows it, it's very hard to stick.
That's it.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to yourself, let's say 5-10 years ago, or just something to pay it forward? Is there anything?
I think for me, and I would say the STAR team, the program is key. If you don't spend the time to fully interrogate your design and have that fully detailed on your program, there's always things that get missed or things that run out. There was a lot of archaeology involved in citizenM as well. It's all about that fully considered. So I'm always like at the start of the job, let's really interrogate the design. Let's make sure the design program is tight, make sure that it aligns with the construction program. But I think program probably is the main thing. And I suppose that's what we find, and de-risking the design, really spending that time early on to interrogate the design, because there's times whenever you get into it and think, oh, why didn't I look at this earlier? If I had looked at this earlier, I would have done this a different way, or I would have constructed in a different method.
Right now, I'm seeing a large contractor and they have not done what you just said. The consequences of it are
Massive.
They're massive. Like a very timely piece, because I'm watching them and they are in hell.
Yeah,
totally. It's funny you said that, Danielle, because this week we have a numbers room, which is like a free session that subcontract directors can come along to. And we had one guy this week and he said, what's the number one piece of advice you give to subcontractors? And I said, get your program in order at tender stage, because no one's really doing it properly. They're not really programming properly, and and then follow it through, you know. And then I said record keeping, but it's got to align back to the program. I think it's something we could probably talk about this all day, but it's something that's not done that well.
Thank you so much for your time. I think the projects have been unbelievably varied. I really look forward to seeing what you go on to next.
So much for having me on. It's been brilliant.
Thank you for listening to Hard Hat Heroines, project highlights from women in construction. We'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsors, Construction Sport, the charity Building Teams and Saving Lives, Centera Project Communication Software, quicker than emails, better than WhatsApp, less soul destroying than paper, and the Tender Trainers, teaching subcontractors how to tender. Subtract the stress, add the profit. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.